All right, we might get going. I think we're doing a recording of this anyway. First of all, I'd just like to welcome everyone to this Diversity Atlas webinar, exclusively for DCA members. My name is Quincy. I'm from Cultural Infusion. I'm the Diversity Atlas Cultural Attaché, and I'll be your host today. And first off, I'd like to acknowledge that where we're zooming from today is in the heart of hipster Collingwood, Melbourne, and it's on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And we acknowledge that this is their land that has never been ceded, and we thank them, acknowledge them, and in particular their elders and leaders past, present, emerging. And I'd also like to give a similar shout out to the Goolagin mob from my hometown in Colac, in Western Victoria, where my home office is situated and where I do most of my work. So again, thank you all for joining today. We hope to do this webinar in under about 25 minutes or so. And we're going to take you on a real lightning quick whirlwind tour of Diversity Atlas. But I just want to quickly say that afterwards, look, if we've done a good enough job to pique your interest, please, we'd love to hear from you, contact us, and we'll be able to give you a one-on-one longer tour, hopefully in the next few weeks or months. Besides which, I don't think we're going to have much time for a stack of questions today. So, we'd love to see you all, over the next couple of weeks. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the comms. I'll be introducing soon my good mate here, Reza. But first, I'm going to hand the comms over to our great mate, Dr. Jane O'Leary from DCA, an organisation, as many of you might know, that we at Cultural Infusion, we work with yearly on the deployment of their amazing and brilliant Inclusive Employer Index, which some of you may already be quite well acquainted with. In fact, some of the names I saw registered today, I know have already done the Inclusive Employer Index. So I'm assuming, Jane, you've got sound capabilities there, if you can hear me.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. I'm on,
yeah,
aren't I? Thanks, Quincy, and hi all. I'm Jane O'Leary, Research Director at Diversity Council Australia, joining you from Turrbal and Yagraland, which is just west of Brisbane. I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes and then hand back to Quincy and Reza. But what I wanted to say is that DCA was really keen to hold this webinar on this product, the Diversity Atlas, as we're conscious that measuring workforce diversity is a key priority for many of our members. And this tool enables organisations to do that and to do it very well. And it's particularly well suited for those organisations who have a global or multinational footprint and need a measurement and a reporting approach which works in multiple jurisdictions. And this does. And through our counting culture work, we've got guidelines on counting culture that many of you may have accessed already. But in the course of looking at that, we looked at lots and lots of products. And this was by far and away the best available, as I've said, particularly for global and multinational corporations. The other good thing about this product is that we trust the people who created it and deliver it. And that's Quincy and Reza and the team. And we have great confidence in them. So that's why we're partnering today to share the good news about this product with you. So I'll hang around at the end in case we do have time for questions. But other than that, I'm going to hand back to Reza and Quincy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jane, and thank you for those kind words. Yes, and we'll touch a little bit more on counting cultures a little later on. And thank you, Jane and DCA, of course, for having us and helping us today. So I'd now like to introduce my good friend and colleague, Reza Moini. He's both the Project Director of Diversity Atlas and the Chief Technology Officer of Cultural Infusion. And it was actually Reza who built the foundations and infrastructure of Diversity Atlas. And so I'll let him explain the genesis of this whole project.
Thank you very much, Quincy. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Rose, Lisa, and all the friends at the DCA team. I very much enjoyed the work we're doing together. Thank you very much. Good day, everyone. It's great to be here. Lovely to meet you all here from Collingwood. So I've got a background in electronic engineering and a master's degree in computer science, but in the last 7.5 years, I had the opportunity to work in the DEI space, and I absolutely love every second of my life in this domain. I want to say that technology is beautiful, but when it comes to the area of social science and the people, it becomes even more mesmerizing. Data and information are buzzwords everywhere. We know a lot about the products that we build, produce, and sell. We know a lot about the marketing campaigns we deliver. We know a lot about to who we sell, but usually we know the least about who we are in our team. So people are the most important assets of any organizations, and we usually have the least information about who we are in a team. That's what we do, basically. So about six and a half years ago, we started building a robust understanding around diversity by modeling the diversity, by disaggregating the culture into different pillars and measuring each pillar independently using entropy, theory of probability, L1 norm, and many other analytical approaches. And this model is also being supported by, we call it the biggest database of humanity, including 45,000 elements of languages, ethnicities, religions, countries of birth, disabilities, and etc. Without having an inclusive and high resolution data, we cannot enjoy the beautiful high resolution picture of who we are in a team. So that's technically what we do. We also look at the diversity from different aspects of variety, balance, and disparity. So variety is like, I'm Persian, you're Italian. These are two different elements. Balance is, imagine that if you put everyone from an South Asian background in IT and everyone from, let's say, South European background in accounts and a hegemony on top. This has variety, but doesn't have the balance. So that's the second aspect of diversity. And the third, but not the least, is disparity. And by disparity, I mean the distance between elements of diversity. So imagine that in one team, you have people speaking Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian. And in the second team, people are speaking Portuguese, Japanese, and Swahili. So you would say that the second team has a greater diversity because the distance between Japanese and Portuguese is greater than the distance between Portuguese and Spanish. And we model these elements and we measure them, analyze them in the platform called Diversity Atlas. Organizations are the owners of their data. It's a standalone product, self-explanatory, and you can play with the data and do what you want. We're very passionate about this work, hundreds of literature reviews, many papers we published and presented. I probably can talk about another 5 hours, but you're here to listen to Quincy and see the mechanic and experience of the platform. So I'll join from my computer. I'll be in the chat box for any feedback, any comments, any questions. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you. Thanks, Quincy.
Beauty. Thank you, Reza. Yeah, he's quite humble. He's the genius that built this. And when he talks about factorial analysis and algorithms and so on, I kind of lose it a bit, but we're very glad to have him. So without further ado, I'm going to quickly go through a couple of PowerPoint slides here. If I can get my PowerPoint to work, here we go. This is who we are, Cultural Infusion. We're based in Melbourne. We have a suite of products, Diversity Atlas being our flagship product, but we also work with Sound Infusion, which is a sound, kind of like a Pro Tools, educational, cultural sound program for mainly primary school students. We also do a lot of work in the schools space, as we have been doing for a couple of decades now. We have a lot of research partners that have helped us build Diversity Atlas and some amazing customers, including DCA, but also we've been lucky enough to work recently with Amazon. We've recently signed a 5-year contract with the United Nations to deploy Diversity Atlas across the World Food Programme, which we're really looking forward to. And also one with the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre, which is the first, we hope, of many museums from around the world. At the heart of what Reza was just talking about, inclusive data sets, is just this one little quote. You know, the Australian census, when they deploy it, they kind of, you know, split the world into about 28 groups, one of which is, I think, mainland Southeast Asian. Now, there was a comment made to the ABC after the last census by a woman who said, look, it makes me feel like we do not exist. And it just makes me feel like we're disappeared. It's very important because it's our identity to continue and pass it on to our children, to be proud of their ancestry of Kachin. Now, she was a woman from a Kachin ethnic group from, I think, north of Myanmar. Not only do we have 80 ethnic groups from Myanmar, we have 8,500 people groups from around the world just on our ancestry question, and you can pick up to 8. So it's not like the Australian census where they just limit it to 2 from a selection of 28. Now, that message is repeated across a whole lot of pillars, which I'll touch on soon. Now, as for Diversity Atlas and the implementation process, it's all pretty easy. We start with what we call a discovery session where we talk about, timing. We talk about, your objectives. We can run a little bit of a mini audit, which will determine your existing DEI framework. So we get a feel for where you are on your DEI journey. We move quickly on to the configuration. We set up groups for this. Now with the groups, for some of you who have done the inclusive employer, you'll understand a little bit about our groups structure, but with Diversity Atlas, it's actually 2 layers. So we have customers like Amazon, for instance, who do it by country. So they have Amazon Australia, Amazon New Zealand, Amazon Singapore, Amazon Malaysia. Then they have subgroups below that. So it's Australia HR department, Australia IT department, Australia corporate affairs, and so on. And that way, that comes in very handy later on when you're doing all the reporting, because you can, view by country, by region, but you can also then horizontally make groupings such as all of the sales and marketing departments from around the world or from around the regions, and put them as one big sales and marketing group, for instance. So we do a fair bit of work with you on that configuration, and it's also to do with your extra questions. Now, our survey has 26 core questions, which I'm about to run you through. But beyond that, the customer can then put in their own questions. And there's a real art to that. And we love working with our customers to work on those extra questions. Quite often they're about inclusion or well-being or belonging, some free text questions. What do you think we could do here to make our place more inclusive or diverse? One, we even had a customer not that long ago who in Australia, they asked a very pointed question, which I found really interesting. They actually asked about January 26 and said, should we move that public holiday away from January 26? How should we refer to January 26? So you can also use that extra question capability to ask pointed questions. We're also there to help with your communication strategy as well, and we can help with text, visuals, videos, and so on to deploy. And then comes the survey. Now, I'm going to go through the survey in lightning quick timing. It usually takes me about an hour, and I can babble on for a long time. But as I said, I hope to see you all at some point in the near future, and we can do a one-on-one slower tour. So what we're seeing here is what the participant sees. They click on a link that you send, and I'll show you how to do that soon. And they are then taken straight to this survey. It comes in these languages. We just added Greek and Vietnamese only a couple of months ago. We've got Hindi and Arabic on the roadmap next. So you pick your language, click a box, and away you go into the survey. So these are the core questions. On the first page, we're just concentrating on demographics and attributes, which we can then use as filter options later on. So we asked about birth year, which gets aggregated into generations, which, mind you, I love doing. A lot of our customers are getting us to do filtered analysis by Gen Z, so that it provides a kind of crystal ball view of what their organization is going to look like in a couple of decades' time. We split sex at birth from gender. For us, it's 2 completely different questions, and as such, they have 2 different drop-down selections. Education is highest level of education attained. Sometimes customers have said, don't know about asking that one, but we find it important. It doesn't matter where, say, tertiary degree numbers are within an organisation, whether it's 10% of the organisation or 90%. What we're seeing is a trend where there's always a greater expectation for women to have a bachelor degree than it is for men to get to the same job positions or same job roles. And, obviously that's the sort of analysis we can provide there. Position level, you can pick your own position level. So, military, we've worked with the military where they do it by private, corporal, sergeant, so on. Hospitals do it in their own way. Amazon, who I just mentioned before, they do it by level. So Jeff Bezos is level 14 and, entry-level trainee intern is level 1 and so on. But you can pick your own position level, and we can provide filter analysis of that later. Disability/condition, you can select up to 5 or none. We did /condition because, obviously people who are neurodiverse may not consider it to be disability, or they might. We err always on the side of self-identification. And by the way, prefer not to answer is an option on pretty much all our questions. And for us, prefer not to answer is an answer in and of itself. And we run full analysis on which areas, whether it be religion or gender or sexuality or what have you, which had the highest prefer not to answer rate, so that, that can pose questions later on. I should also point out that all of these questions can be turned on or off in regions. Obviously, we like them all being on, but sometimes, for instance, we've been into, we're deploying in the Middle East at the moment, and we've done it in certain parts of Asia where it's illegal to be homosexual, for instance. So sometimes we've had legal advice to turn certain questions off in certain regions, which we can do. So the first of our cultural pillars that Reza touched on that informs his algorithm and his diversity index is this one around countries. So you select your country of birth, whatever country you pick, all the states will be there. But we also ask about parents and grandparents as well, because we believe that's a part of the story. We also ask here, very important, have you lived in any other country that has influenced your life? Because quite often that's a more important question to people than where they happen to be born. We also ask about citizenship. This page is my favorite one. It's all about cultures. As I said, we have 8,500 options in our cultural people groups. Now, some of them are very broad. So, for instance, we found over in Europe, a lot of people just like ticking European, particularly the Germans. The French are a bit more specific. They like picking that they're French, but they can be French Creole or French West Indian and so on. But we can get really precise too. So I mentioned the Gulajan, who are my local mob down in Colac, and they're here as well as may I point out, over 900 Native American tribes out of the USA. And we're just updating recently our Cameroonian ethnic groups, because we've got an anthropologist working with us now from Cameroon who's helping us, just work out, because they've got over 100 ethnic groups in Cameroon, and we're loading all of those up. So that's just part one of that. What is your ancestry? And because for us, it's a different question to say, what culture do you belong? To what cultures do you belong? It's the same database, but we're seeing different answers. So somebody might be of Greek heritage. So they might say, okay, my ancestry is Greek, but I'm just Australian now. Or they might say they're Greek and Australian. And it's interesting watching, what happens to these answers. We find for some reason Irishness is eroded. A lot of people put Irish and English over here. And then to what culture do you belong? They'll keep Anglo-Australian, for instance, but Irishness seems to drop off. And as always, you can always prefer not to answer. What other cultures have had an impact on you? And this is more to do with perhaps you've married into a culture, or you've immersed yourself into a culture. You want to show allyship with a culture, but you don't want to appropriate that culture. Here's your chance to express that. This question is one of my favorites. What aspects of your cultural or social identity are the most important to you? Interesting seeing the different results we get here in different countries. In South Africa, Middle East, for instance, my religion worldview always comes up pretty high, but then you deploy this in Australia and Great Britain and it doesn't even make the top 10. And it's really interesting. And it just goes to show, particularly if you're a global organization, that there's no one size fits all cultural, dissemination process. You've got to be able to meet your teams in different regions, and sometimes in different states and different cities, and even in different rooms within the same building, somewhat, halfway or part of the way. Appearance, we don't ask the term race. We believe race is a construct. Racism exists, but race to us is a murky area that is nebulous. And so, but we do think appearance is an important question to ask, particularly in countries such as ours, where the representation of people of colour is sadly all over the place and lacking in very important areas. So we use the term appearance. And you can select up to 4 there. Interestingly, a lot of customers ask us to turn that off. I think it's a little bit, risky to ask. However, we had one customer who had it turned off, and then they contacted us a few months later and said, "Oh, can you let us know how many people of colour we have in, senior management?" And we had to say, "I'm sorry, we can't tell you because you turned that question off." Sexuality, pretty basic list there. Okay, I'll go a little bit quicker now. Languages, we have 11,200 options. And by that, I mean, we have over 140 types of English. We also have sign languages from around the world. And we also have constructed languages. For instance, we have a whole stack of people, more than you would imagine, selecting Klingon, for instance, as a language they speak to a basic level. But most importantly, we ask about language proficiency. So we have advanced, intermediate, and basic. You know, we have one customer based in Austria who said to me, you know, we know that all our staff speak German and English, but what we want to know is what percentage of our staff don't speak German or English to an advanced level. And we were able to give them that data. So it was 20%, I think, didn't speak either of the two to an advanced level. Next on their list was Hindi and Croatian, and they started to do, you know, translation of staff contracts and OH&S documents and so on. The last of our core questions is religion, worldview. 7,900 options in this one. And again, by that, I mean, you know, with Christianity, Catholic, for instance, I think we've got over 100 different types of Catholicism in there. Now, you can just pick Christianity. You can say Christianity, Catholic, but you can take the deep dive and say Christianity, Catholic, Catholic Churches, Slovenia, for instance. But you might also be a Jedi or a Pastafarian, for instance, and you enjoy your Buddhist retreats on the weekend. So you can select up to 3 here, or you can simply prefer not to answer, or say, I have no religion or worldview. So that's where our core survey finishes. The participant will submit. And where it all comes is live onto this dashboard. So it would take me several hours to get you through this entire dashboard. So I'm just going to show you some of the highlights here. So here's the countries of birth of all the people from this made up company, MRQMQ Pharmaceutical. There's a gender and age graph of the participants. We have this beautiful diversity calendar that we launched a couple of months ago. So, you know, it's got all sort of, you know, days of national significance coming up on the culturally diverse calendar from around the world. Nude Food Day in Australia, that was over the weekend. There you go, I don't know about that one. Then most importantly down here is this diversity index, which is informed by Reza's algorithm. So this is this index here tracks your diversity over time. There's no correct place for it to be. You don't want it at 0 because that's 50 white guys in the same room that are all in their 50s. They're all Catholics. You don't want it at 100 because that's 50 people who speak 50 different languages and believe in 50 different gods. That's too diverse. So I guess it should be somewhere between, say, 15 and 85. But most importantly, is it something that you track over time? So this is a measurement of this company's cultural diversity based on our definitions and our pillars. And when the company then redeploys this survey in a year's time, they might see that their dial here goes up to 52. So what that tells them is that in that period, they became more diverse. And then they can compare that fact with metrics of their own choosing, whether that be, you know, profits or productivity or staff morale or, you know, well-being, inclusion, engagement, pulse, you know, all of the other data that they may have. Going through the dashboard, I'll just pick on world views. We've got all sorts of beautiful different views here that bring up all the results. We've got hundreds of these key facts and hundreds more along the way. Each of these pillars get their own little diversity index. So you can see, okay, look, we're quite diverse here on religions, but we're not that diverse on, say, cultures or languages and so on. You can take the deep dive also into, you know, churches and denominations and branches and so on, just to see where, you know, because quite often, you know, on surveys, they just go, okay, 40% are Christian, but that doesn't really tell you the full story of, you know, people's, you know, Christian experiences, for instance. And even with secularism, you know, we've got so many different secularist choices in there: humanism, secularism, atheism, agnosticism, and so on. And it can give you all those sorts of views. Over in the compare, when you set up your groups, you can then compare your groups. So you might want to say, okay, let's compare the IT department to the company as a whole. It gives you that instance, you know, LGBT numbers, language, top 10s, top 5 countries of birth, and so on. Because as Reza pointed, you know, we don't want to see silos of diversity. A lot of companies say, oh, you know, 10% of our staff are from India. And you think that's great. And they're all in IT. There's nobody born in India that happened to be in your HR department or in management and so on. So this internal comparison helps with that. With external comparison, again, the dashboard comes loaded with census data from around the world, but we can load up any data you like in here. We recently worked with a hospital who loaded up patient data, for instance. And with healthcare, we work with a lot of healthcare organizations because, it's very important. And all the studies show that, the more mutuality you have with your patients, the better it's going to be for health outcomes, when it comes to, languages and so on. You also, all your extra questions are in here. You can see all the results of all the questions that you added to the survey. And then you can filter all, not just your extra questions, but everything else at any point. But say, okay, let's just show me all the results of all the women over the age of 40, for instance. And away you go there with the filter option. Like I said, I could probably talk about this for hours and hours and hours. Oh, sorry, I just point out that you can also do, export CSV reports with all the raw data. I'll take a little bit of a breath and just summarize by saying that I think, I'll just check the time. Yep, right on time. We've got about 2 minutes. After this, comes the period where we start looking at insights and reports. And I haven't left myself enough time to talk a lot about that. But what I find that, every customer is on a different, position on their journey, on their D&I journey. And they all get different things out of our platform. If I was to summarize what all our customers have in common, it would be that, obviously they're being innovative and they want inclusive data sets. They want that high res data sets rather than just, 40% of Christian. They want the deep dive, but they can't get it themselves because they're HR. They need to go to third-party data gatherers. We've got all the security in place. It's completely anonymous, this survey. It doesn't, connect to any staff records and so on. Their staff or the members of their organization, are assured of their anonymity. And so they're far more likely to answer these questions. And with third-party data gatherers, we're experts in this, and we can gather the data they need that they can then create, bespoke DEI initiatives in the future. So I think I've probably left out about 55 points that I wanted to make, but I do get quite proud of showing the survey. So look, I hope that you enjoyed this whirlwind tour. Here's my email address, quincy.hall@diversityatlas.io. If any of you that happen to be here today would like a one-on-one tour where you can ask me as many hundreds of questions as you like, please send me an email. I'd love to meet you all one by one, and we can go through it bit by bit. Now, I don't know, Reza, I think we might have 1 minute left. Reza, have you been looking? Has there been any questions that have come through? I don't even know if Reza can hear me.
Yeah, I can. And I'll fit my running shoes in the chat box.
Oh, any questions?
About 150 of them.
Oh, okay. All right. In your last few seconds, what's your favorite question that you saw?
Yeah, Michelle asked about the variety and the diverse list of Aboriginal cultures that we cover in Diversity Atlas. I tried to answer in the chat box, but you can provide more information, Quincy.
So I didn't quite hear the question because it was echoing. So maybe
tell us about, okay. So how you map the Aboriginal people in Australia or other cultures, how many cultures, ethnicities, or spiritual beliefs are there, and how you map the Aboriginal people in Diversity Atlas.
Okay, so with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes and clans we dealt with and the mobs, we worked with AETSIS, they're called as, but we've also, it's true to say, curated as we went. I found just with my local mob, the Gulajan, it was in as Kolaknat in the official literature, which is where the term Kolak, the word Kolak came from. And so I reached out to the Wadawurrung Aboriginal Co-op just to get, some correction on the spelling. As they pointed out to me, spelling is a Western construct, and that's true to say. But they did point out, Koloknat is a place. It wasn't a mob. The mob were the Gulajan. The language that they spoke was Gulajan, but it was also Jadawarong, which was the language of the Wadawurrung, and it's the same language, but they had different names for it. So as we go, we reach out to the co-ops and the subject matter experts and the advocacy groups, not just on tribal groups and ethnicities, but on all our databases. We have religious scholars working for us and anthropologists and linguists and so on. And our databases are very fluid. We added 2 religions last week that we didn't have, Hermeticism and Ietzism, which comes out of Netherlands, which translates into English as somethingism. It's people who believe that there's something out there, but don't want to subscribe to a mainstream religion. So, our databases are fluid and ever changing. I hope that answers somewhat. So I think we're there at about 2:30. So look, thank you yet again to everybody for attending. And as I said, send us an email and we'd love to catch up with you. But for now, thank you again. Thank you, Jane. Thank you to everyone at DCA. You guys are awesome. And thank you, Reza. And we'll see you all hopefully soon.